Okay, let's get into a full season review so far. So we're going to speak about all the games we've played so far. So we've, of course, got the 7 Premier League games. We've then got the 2 Champions League games, and we've got the Cup win. So 10 games in total. We're going to speak about a few of the different sort of narratives forming so far already in the season, the different tactical sort of tweaks that have been made throughout the season to make things sort of better and show improvement from each game to game, and a few of the issues that, of course, we've overcome in those games. So to begin with, just to sort of get things going, I'm going to put on screen now the stats. I'm just going to read through them. So far this season, we've got 59.9% possession. That's second in the league for that metric. 12.9 shots, which is fifth. 11.19 XG, which is sixth, which is 1.6 XG generated per 90. 10.9 PPDA, so that's sixth. 1.54 direct speed, which is 19th. 14.29 10 pass sequences, which is fourth. 4.29 passes per sequence, which is second. 1.71 direct attacks is fourth. 0.12 XG per shot is sixth. 0.13 XG per shot conceded is 18th. And 10.9 shots against per 90 is 9th for that metric. Now, in comparison, I'll just show you a few of the stats from last season as well, just to give you somewhat of an idea. Possession was a little bit lower, 57.1%. Of course, that's over a long season, so we'll see how that sort of matches up as we go. That was fourth last season. We was fourth in possession metrics. 15.7 shots per 90, much better, and we're going to speak about the shot volume issues in this video. 72.76 XG generated, which was third. 0.12 XG per shot, so the same as this season. At that point, it was 9th last season. 10.5 shots conceded per 90, so not too dissimilar. That was 4th last season, again, over a long stretch of a season. Being in around that 10 mark is not bad. And 0.14 XG per shot conceded. So it was a little bit worse last season. So the XG per shot we're conceding this season is a little bit better than it was last season, even though that was also 18th at the time. So now that we sort of spoke about the stats and where we're at in terms of a few of those, I think the key ones I want to speak about in today's video are the sort of shot volume that we're creating, and then also just the disparity between the sequences of direct play and the sequences of build-up play. And I think we're going to speak about that when we're talking a little bit more about the tactics of the team, because I think that makes a lot more sense as to when to mention it. So again, then you've got the fixtures we played so far this season. So on screen now, I've got the team that faced Palace in that 0-0 draw. Now, I think the other thing that's key to mention is, of course, the injuries, and that's like a key sort of narrative that is already forming this season, and it's forming more and more as the season goes on. And we've seen it with PSG as well, with players getting injured. This is happening, and I think it is and a lot of people think it is as a sort of effect of that Club World Cup. So, of course, we ended up losing, if he's here, Levi Colwill, the biggest loss for me. Cole Palmer has had a really distorted start to this season. Yes, he's played a few games, but he's been in and out, and it looks like he's probably going to miss the next month or so as well. Liam Delap, which is another huge one, and we're going to speak about why, because there's a few sort of changes in these first few fixtures that we saw with Maresca noticing sort of the need to use Delap and Pedro together and the reasons for that, and I think a very big sort of reason towards our shot volume issues, which we're going to speak about. And then, of course, you've got the likes of Wesley Fofana and Lavia. Like, they've been fit, but you're having to manage them so sort of carefully that I've sort of got them in this list. And then Dario Asugo, who's, I think here, he's also out until about January, but his one's less sort of impactful, but the reason I've got him sort of highlighted is because it's meant the likes of Caicedo and Enzo have had to play those extra minutes because Andre Santos was injured last game. Lavia, like we said, we've already got him highlighted. So there's been a lot of key injuries, which is, again, it's important to sort of speak about and use that context when we talk about these games. So starting with this first game, I think the first issues that we sort of came over and the first tweaks that Maresca had to make was very much around, and the big sort of talking point to start the season was, what are we going to do in terms of playing out from the back? He clearly wanted a central centre-back, and he opted for a Chempong in this game because Tosin was injured. And against those back five teams, because you're going to see a bit of a trend here. Now, Crystal Palace, first game of the season. West Ham, then Fulham, who also played in a 5, and Brentford, who also played in a 5. The first 4 Premier League games of the season were all against back 5 sides. We then played Bayern, who were in a 4. We then played Man U, who also played in a 5. Lincoln, who also played in a 5. So it wasn't until Brighton that we played a Premier League game against a back 4 side. Then Benfica and Liverpool, both back 4s as well. So those last 3 games where we've actually managed to get wins, 3-1. We lost 3-1 to Brighton, and I think we were really good in that first half. And if it wasn't for that red card, I think we get a win in that game. And then you got Benfica and Liverpool, 2 decent wins, and both gets back 4 side. So let's talk about the back 5 sort of tactics and strategy that we saw early in the season. Because, like I say, the first narrative was having this central centre back. How are we going to play out from the back? And we wanted to sort of stick with this 3-1-6 shape, having Cucurella push up into the pocket so that you can have 3 players in between the lines, and then you have that sort of single pivot of Caicedo. The idea being that sort of timely rotations can mean that sort of Palmer can drop in to get on the ball in here with Caicedo at times, and then Fernandes can, and Cucurella can, and you sort of have those timely movements for these players to sort of form that +1 alongside Caicedo. Now, the main issues we sort of fell into in these early stages of the season, with especially the Palace game, was Trevor Chalobah playing on that left-hand side and really stunting our progression to not only find Cucurella sort of making those moves to receive wide, as these number 8s often do. They sort of come onto this axis between the centre-back, the wide centre-back and the winger, which we spoke about a lot last season. We was unable to really access those wide number 8 sort of movements, especially on that left side, because of Chalobah being on that side of the pitch and that angle bias, which is something we soon sort of twisted against West Ham. Now, also, I think having João Pedro up front against these back 5 teams where you need to pin 3 central defenders, Palace were finding it really easy to sort of jump out and sort of apply pressure on each of Cucurella, Palmer and Fernandes. They were making it it was much easier for the centre-backs to jump out and apply that pressure here, because João Pedro, whilst he's very good in that position, in my opinion, it's more so against back 4s that I like him as a striker. Against back 5s, I don't think he has that same sort of... His tendencies isn't to sort of pin the back line and take them away by making those runs in behind to stretch the pitch. Instead, he wants to come and sort of get involved in this play here, which then allows these centre-backs to be a little bit more tight and compact. They know where he wants to go. They're not as threatened about that movement in behind, so they're more confident to step up and be on your pocket players, which is exactly what they did in that game. So then we move on to the second game, which is a 5-1 win against West Ham. A lot of people would say they'd say our best performance of the season. I don't think it was. I think the first half against Brighton is genuinely probably our best performance of the season. Well, maybe Liverpool, actually. But let's go into this game a little bit, because the changes that were made were, of course, so Acheampong drops out because Tosin gets back. Chalobah goes over. James didn't play. So you could see straight away here, Cucurella, so you go into a back 3 like this. Of course, Caicedo keeps his spot. Fernandes shifts over to this left side. Palmer was set to start from the right, so Gittins also drops out because, again, the trust is something we need to speak about with the likes of Gittins and Garnacho, and I think over time it's going to build, but especially at this early point of the season, you could tell that the trust wasn't there, and we definitely saw that in those games with the red cards. So we saw Fernandes go over sort of playing in that left pocket. Palmer was meant to start from the right, but then in the warm-up, he ended up getting injured, so actually ended up being Esteval, who played the exact same role that Palmer would have played in this game. Because what happened is Pedro played in at 10. Sorry, it's really hard to find all the names I need. So we need Delap started up front, so he was key in this game. Gusto started as well, and so did Esteval. So the idea here was Esteval can sort of drift inside, Gusto can provide that width, and we have these 3 pocket players in behind a centre forward who is going to do the job that we just mentioned wasn't really done to the best ability against Palace, pinning those defenders, but also making runs to open this space for these pocket players to sort of make things happen. And we saw it with goals where Delap was being used as a bit of a backboard for someone like Esteval getting to the byline and putting it across for Fernandes arriving here. Those double pocket, or the triple pocket players really, but the 2 half space players really, really important in this game, and allowing Pedro to sort of be a little bit more all action in the middle of the park, and he was really good in that game as well. But again, the changes that we also speak about, because of the issues in the first game where we spoke about Chalobah, went back to basics. Again, it did mean dropping Reece, because I don't think, obviously, Maresca wanted him to be doing this role. But back to basics to ensure that we have a right foot on the right, a left foot on the left, and then somebody who can sort of go both ways from the central centre-back position, dictate the tempo, and really split the lines to find these 2 players in the pockets, or 3 players in the pockets. So quite a few changes in that first game. These guys mainly being the runners as well, just to speak about with Liam Delap. So dynamic changes which really, really suited us, and we saw a dominant display because of it. Yes, West Ham, a poor side this season so far, especially at that point in the season under Potter. But key changes nonetheless, and ones that sort of are very important to speak about when we're talking about the rest of the season, because then Liam Delap getting injured, we then saw against Fulham. I'm not going to make every single change now, like as it happened, but I'm just going to sort of speak about the key bits for each game. So the key bit for the Fulham game for me was when Delap went out injured, Tyreek George came on up front and João Pedro stayed in the 10. And the reason I think this happened was the exact same reason as we've seen in the other games. I think we needed someone like Tyreek George to keep stretching the play. The game plan clearly throughout the week for the Fulham game had been for João Pedro to be in this role again, and Tyreek George or Delap in the beginning to be the one stretching the play and allowing that space for João Pedro to operate and hit. So I think that's why that change was made. And I think that shows you that Maresca, against these back five teams, he does want João Pedro to be playing in the 10 if possible, when it can be worked on for long periods of time. And I think it is something we're going to see a lot more when Delap's back against these back five teams. But also now with Guiu sort of being played a little bit against Liverpool, will we see it in the following games? Now, against Forest, I don't expect to, because I think they will play a 4. But they could play a 5, so we'll see. So it could even happen there. I think the Wolves game is the one to keep a key eye on, because I think that one is an obvious game where they are very likely to start in a 5, where Maresca might go for Guiu through the middle and João Pedro just off of him. So that Wolves game, I've sort of got a firm eye on for that idea that we could see. So yeah, the Fulham game, that's the main change, and we go on to win that game, even though Delap gets injured. But again, the key thing being Delap getting injured. Now, the Brentford draw, I'm not going to get it all up on the tactics board, but I think the main thing to sort of speak about for the Brentford draw is literally the starting lineup, because we have both Reece James and Cucurella having to come from the bench in that game to essentially save the game. And when they came on, the team was so much more composed on the ball. We were sustaining pressure higher up. The press was better. The intent was better. The ability to sort of break the lines. Everything was so much better with Cucurella and Reece James on the pitch. Now, also, again, I'm not going to change all the sort of personnel within this. Let's say who else would be in here. Let's just say it sort of like this for now. Like this, just so we've got sort of a shape, a semi-shape of what we could see, what we could have seen. So against Brentford and against other teams where we've been playing against this back five, I think something we have been doing where we don't start in the same way is with the 2-2-5-1. We don't usually start like that. We do usually start with the 3-1-6 and sort of try to see how the opponent are going to press us. Now, playing with the 2-2-5-1 is very good if they're going to press with one striker, because you know that you can overload them by splitting the centre-back. So let's say Cucurella pushes on. You've got the two centre-backs split. They've only got one striker, so you're going to be able to sort of get to one side of the pitch. Then they're probably going to go man for man in this area of the pitch. You're going to have an inverted 2 here, and then you're going to have sort of your 3 like this, basically a pentagon in the middle of the park, right? Like this, and then you've got your 2 wingers and your striker. Now, this worked really, really well in games where we changed to it, but that was because we had already sort of used that starting the game in a little bit more of a safe manner to actually consider and analyse how they're pressing to then make the adjustments as they are necessary. I think if you start like this, now maybe we do see it in the future if Maresca is extremely confident that the players are sort of willing to, he's very confident of, one, how the opposite team are going to set up, but also his players sort of executing in the correct manner. Because in this sort of way you play, you have to be really certain you're not going to give the ball over in these sort of deeper areas of the pitch, especially sort of in this sector. Because if you do, and these players are sort of peeled wide, and there's so much space to be exploited, not only because of the split between the two centre-backs, but also because of the space sort of vacated in wide areas if they sort of step in. And also, again, you've got both fullbacks technically inverted into these areas. So there's a lot of space for opposition teams to exploit. And I do think that it's heavily based on how the opposition press. But it's something to speak about because it is something we have done. I think other games that we just need to mention, I think, yes, the 3-1 loss against Bayern. I don't think we played badly in that game. But again, very, very good performance from them. Key mistakes from ourselves as well, which is a key sort of thing of the season against Brentford, against Bayern, then against Man United with the red card, then Lincoln away. Very, very tough game, but shouldn't have been, of course. But it's just one of those games that I think we just needed. It was just get a win and sort of move on. So we're not really going to overly touch on that game because it was a very ugly game. lots of long throws, lots of them sort of exposing parts of the squad that for me are very weak, because I think we are a lightweight squad, especially when we make a lot of changes. And we sort of, if we don't show up with that exact mentality of we are in a fight here, which against Lincoln you can understand, maybe not understand, but you can see how it would happen, is that they don't sort of turn up with that same mindset of we need to sort of really get on the gas pedal early. And it can lead to sort of awkward games like that, where long throw after long throw, lots of breakages, lots of stoppages in play. And yeah, just a tough game to watch, really. Brighton. Now let's speak about this, because instead of going into Brighton, Benfica and Liverpool all separately, I'll sort of use this to go into the sort of systematic changes that we've seen as of late. Now let me just put Badiashile here and put Chalobah here. So now what we're talking about is sort of this 4-3-3 almost. Let's just put Santos here because he did play there against Brighton, and then let's just put Neto here. Sort of go like this. So against all three of these, especially the first half against Brighton, then Benfica, then Liverpool, we've been seeing this sort of system here now where the fullbacks are starting with a little bit deeper on the ball, which we do usually see from goal kicks, because we'd almost sort of form a 4-2-4 from goal kicks, almost De Zerbi-esque at times. And then we sort of shift into our almost sort of 3-2 or 3-1 base that we've been speaking about a little bit earlier, but also the one that we spoke about a lot last season. But these last few games, what I've loved about this is starting in this way, where it allows the likes of Fernandes to drop in and sort of get involved here, Santos to drop in, but also to make those runs in beyond someone like João Pedro if he drops in. You've almost got like a diamond in the middle of the pitch there. And then what you've got is, of course, you've got your two wingers who are like willing to make those runs or offer as sort of outlet passes, because what will then happen is these two will drift inside. So now, firstly, what you get is, look how connected that sort of central sort of area of the pitch is. If we sort of just go from here, the connectivity, the distances, you've got Caicedo in there as well, and like these players sort of dropping in. The distances and the ability for them to sort of connect one touch, two touch, and use that technical quality is extremely sort of key for this team. It also allows for a lot more rotations, and we've seen that with the likes of Cucurella. Enzo drops in, Cucurella can sort of run in beyond, and it allows you to have those runners, especially if this was, say, Gusto as well. But again, you've seen it with James, who's found himself at times in this area of the pitch, but he's not having to do the same sort of lung-busting runs. If you haven't seen the videos about I've made a video about this tactic that Enzo Maresca is using in a bit more detail, so I would go watch that if you haven't already. But the reason I love what this is sort of allowing Chelsea to do is the fact that it just gives that sort of that ability for more rotations. It's still got that sort of security. It doesn't have the same emphasis of a central centre-back on the ball, so you're coming away from that reliance on somebody having to split the lines to find that. But you're also getting that balance of runners, which we do sort of lack, especially from central areas. But you've got Garnacho, he's starting to sort of start a few games and really offer that, because in the absence of the likes of Delap, some of your biggest runners in this Chelsea team are your fullbacks. Cucurella, who's able to sort of make those rotations with Fernandes and attack the box, but also Gusto, and we saw that usage of him against Liverpool, where he's starting in this middle role, and I think it's so key that he did so, because what it allowed is when João Pedro does drop in, it gives you somebody who's going to stretch the pitch, and it just makes them think. And it was sort of indicative with his run for the Caicedo goal, where he's attacking that back line, making a really clever run to make sure that Van Dijk can't step out and apply pressure on Caicedo, because if he didn't make that run, Van Dijk could actually approach Caicedo and block him. But because Gusto was sort of making that run and being an off-ball runner, which is something he does really, really well, it stopped Van Dijk from stepping out, and it allowed Caicedo to sort of hit that with a little bit less pressure and a little bit less sort of coverage on him. So this system has worked really, really well, really good against Brighton until the red card, and then two big wins against Benfica and Liverpool, all sort of utilising these ideas, which I think are going to continue to develop. A few other things to mention just before we wrap up the video. I think, of course, the Maresca decisions from the red card games, I think they did get a lot of heat. I am not as harsh on him for those, because one, I think they're such low percentile decisions that he shouldn't be judged on such, especially right now in sort of his earlier stages as a manager. Now, did I agree with every single change? No, but I made that clear at the time as well. I think the two ones in both games, the Neto substitution, are the ones that I were looking at and disagreeing with. Apart from those, I do actually think each change sort of served their purpose, but I think the Neto ones were where he was a little bit rash, especially in Man United game where he took him off and sort of really went defensive. I think that was the big one in that game that maybe you can put a lot more onto. So that's the key one for me that I would speak about if I was going to speak about all those sort of red card, big decisions, sort of game management bits from Maresca. What else have I got written down here? I think that's about all I wanted to mention in terms of sort of the different systems that we've been using. I think the shot volume is probably where we'll end this, because I do think that where it comes down to with the whole shot volume, and like I said at the start, you got the shot volume being lower, but you've also got the direct speed being a little bit low, like it's 1.54, so it's one of the lower sort of direct speeds in the league. We're also one of the teams that play the most sort of long pass sequences and have the most passes per sequence. We still have 1.71 direct attacks per 90, so that is fourth. So we definitely are sort of involved in that side of the game. But I do think that a lot of it comes down to personnel and what you can sort of do. Now, I think the likes of Gusto being used in this role allows you to be a bit more direct. Like I said, if Pedro drops in, you've got a runner in behind. And I think it is very much to do with those profiles of how you can balance this team, and that comes to shot volume and it comes to the directness and how direct you can be. Because to be direct, you need the space to run into, and you need to carve that space out somehow. And again, that comes more against man-to-man teams, and you need those players that are going to make those runs in behind. So with Garnacho sort of becoming a little bit more trusted within this team in the last few games, it gives you more of an outlet to go direct. Something that, again, I think when Delap comes back, it offers you that option to be a bit more direct, because you know that he's going to chase down those sort of lost cause balls. And then it's also not only going to sort of allow the lap to make things happen, but also open up space in there for the likes of Cole Palmer when he returns. So the directness, I think, is very much down to the profiles that you have available. And again, just trying to sort of build and be sort of safe on the ball is quite key when you are poor defensively, or at least we have been poor defensively. I think if you continue to go long on sort of every occasion, you're just giving them back possession and allowing them to attack you. And the last thing you want, if you're poor defensively, is to be attacked for large sort of periods of a game. So I do think that within that, it's important that we sort of keep longer spells on the ball and have those longer passing sequences to afford a bit of time where we're not defending in our own sort of final third, where mistakes can occur, which we have seen as of late. In terms of the shot volume, I think Delap being out is a huge one, because it means João Pedro is having to lead the line. His shot volume has been awful. It's been like near enough one per game, one shot, like 1.4. Really, really poor. Fernandez, he's sort of getting a few per game, but a lot of it being that sort of box crash movements. Garnacho and Gittins, I think where we will see a big improvement is if Gittins starts to get in a little bit more form, Garnacho starts to get a little bit more confident to sort of take those shots when he's getting into those areas. But also Esteval, because I think it's going to be hard to keep him out of the lineup, especially with Cole out now. I think we're going to see him start quite often now. We need those players who can create sort of shots off the dribble, and Gittins and Esteval both give you that. If João Pedro is going to be up front again until Delap comes back, I do think that you need these wingers who can create their own shot, because that's where a lot of that sort of ability to generate shots and shot volume is going to come from. It's going to come from those wingers creating their own shot, or it's going to come from Pedro dropping in deep and having those players being able to run in behind. So you got Fernandez, you got, again, I've put Gusto here, but it could be Andre Santos. I'll just put Gusto next to the Liverpool game. But also Garnacho. That's where he'll come in key, because if Pedro's going to drop in deep, can Garnacho sort of make those runs in behind and be a key outlet to generate those shots and get higher shot volume. So I think the wingers are very key to how much shot volume we have, especially in the absence of Cole Palmer and Liam Delap, meaning João Pedro often plays up front. So that's sort of where I want to leave this video. Any questions, please do leave them in the comments. I'm going to have a Forest video out. So this will go out on Thursday, and then we'll have a Forest video out on Friday, because I'm recording all of that in one go. So let me know any questions. If you've got any questions for the Forest game as well, I'll try and answer them in that video. So if you let me know Let me know any questions you got for that. Let me know any questions you've got from this video. Let me know your thoughts of the season so far. Please do subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. Drop hype points. I don't even know how they work, but I think that helps. So anything to help me out, really, really, really appreciated. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.